Hey, yo, man. How many times I gotta tell you? Where you been so long? We don't wanna know.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend, the talented Mr. PCM CHRIST.
Thank you for having me, man. That was really kind.
Oh, man. Welcome aboard.
I appreciate it, dude. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has been, man. One of my first, I guess, the Myth Pilot interview, you retweeted that, and I followed you after that. So kind of come full circle here now. So I'm sure they'd all love to hear us sit around and chat and shoot the shit and smoke a few beers, but we got some business to do here. And that's to talk about the release today, Friday, August 16th, 2024. Your very first novel entitled Give Up the Ghost. Brother, congratulations, man.
Thank you very much. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's fucking real cool, man. Tell us what you can about the novel and the life and times of one Atticus Remington Scott.
Sure. I guess I could give a little bit of lore too. That would be fun.
Hell yeah.
I had written a few short stories, and my most popular one was called Vide Cormium.
All right.
And and this is after a very long hiatus from writing, and it had done well enough that I got a little pep in my step.
Yep.
And
Sometimes that's all it takes, man.
it really is, and just a concept. And so Lomez, who's a big fan of noir, he had tweeted once about Scandinavian noir, which I'm a fan of. The most popular writer probably being Joe Nesbo, if you want the pure stuff. But also like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, like the Millennium Trilogy would fall in with this too.
Yeah.
And he was tweeting about it, and I'm familiar with the genre. And there was a movie with Michael Fassbender called The Snowman.
Yes, good film.
That it could have been great, right? It could have been. Apparently, it kind of fell apart during production.
Oh no!
And you can tell sort of in the latter half, but it was such a good movie, and
it could have been a greater movie, I guess. But it falls into the Scandi noir.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And just to sort of set up Give Up the Ghost too, is Scandinavian noir is different in that it epitomizes the culture and surroundings of Scandinavia.
Yes.
Right. Which you could argue all noir does, but because it's so localized, then it develops like a really, really, defined taste, and sort of, everything about it is rich.
The setting becomes a character in a way.
It does, including the characters themselves, right? Like in Scandinavian noir, like it's almost always snowing, right? It's cold, like, the elements are a threat, the people themselves are kind of, like gray.
Man versus nature.
Yeah. And so he had tweeted about this, and I told him, I said, I just tweeted him. It was just kind of an epiphany, I guess. And I was like, I'm gonna write a Dixie Noir.
All right.
And originally, and so I just kind of started from there. I was wondering what that was. And originally it was called Terminus.
Explain Dixie Noir, because I think in terms of literary genres, many people understand what Gothic is, right? It's the late 18th century. It's dark, mysterious, romantic. You've got all the OG horror ones. You got Mary Shelley, you got Bram Stoker, and the Bronte sisters, you got Poe. Now, Southern Gothic is
Mm,
getting a little bit more narrowed down subgenre of Gothic. Faulkner, Flannery O'Connor, you got a Harper Lee a little bit in there, but then
yes.
themes of decay, degeneracy. But explain what Dixie Noir, and a term that you've said to me, which I think is particularly interesting, heretical realism. Explain what those are and what the differences might be between them.
Sure. Well, Dixie Noir, besides sort of the Epiphanous moment, was was meant to differentiate it from Southern Gothic. And so not only to kind of bring it into modernity a bit
Mm.
and to signal something uh postmodern, but it was to take these concepts of Scandinavian noir, the presence of nature, and you'll get something like that where, well, I won't get ahead of myself. Um, and so Dixie Noir was to sort of take the classic trope of, an almost anti-hero and to put him into the elements of a certain kind.
Mm.
Now, with Southern Gothic, what you're usually going to be dealing with are definitive elements of the Old South, which are obviously there in my book.
Yes.
And but most importantly, in the Old South, or in Southern Gothic, then you're going to expect some type of freaks, right? Flannery O'Connor had an essay where she used this numerous times, right? This was the defining element between the South and the North, where she said that the South still knew what a freak was, and often they were accepted by family, right? The
Mm.
South knew what to do with a freak. With Dixie Noir, I was less interested in doing that. As much as I do love the Southern Gothic and I love the elements, and anything Southern is going to have elements of history. It's going to have um, the presence of one in nature because everything is alive down here. And so with Dixie Noir, I kind of just wanted to capture all of those elements together and put it into a genre mode.
Yeah.
And I do think I've said before, and I'll lead into heretical realism to a degree with this. I personally read a lot of literature, but I don't think that anything can be for modernity, for discovering and recontextualizing new truths, which is a primary objective of mine. I don't believe they can be discovered through literature as it's known, and by that I usually detailing in capital R realism.
Okay.
Of course, you have postmodernism, which was much more to do with the form of the novel.
Okay.
And so last bit of lore, man. Sorry, I'm talking a lot here.
Oh man, it's your interview.
So I come up with this term Dixie Noir, and I'm like, okay, I'm excited about this.
This is part of the
which is
tweet
what
back to Lomez.
Yeah. So I come up with that, and immediately I'm like, okay, this is cool. And so
Yeah.
I talked to a couple writer friends and just tell them the concept. And one of them says to me, he says, "Oh, like True Detective season 1."
Mm.
And I'd never seen True Detective season 1. I'd never heard of it. I think I might have
Okay.
heard the name, but I had no connection to it.
Yeah.
And so he's like, "Yeah, man, this sounds just like True Detective season 1." And I was like, "Motherfucker!" And so I went and I watched it,
Okay.
and what it did, it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And the funny enough, the original script, because it's definitively Louisiana,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And I think there are multiple reasons they did that, but the original script actually had them in Arkansas,
Okay. Okay.
in the Ozarks.
Any idea why they moved the location?
Um, I mean, not like from a business sense. I mean, you can imagine it had something to do with filming rights and
Sure.
tax cuts
Sure.
and everything.
But you get the same effect, the swamps and
I mean, Louisiana is so untapped when
Yeah.
it comes to its aesthetic appeal.
Yeah.
And its
Oh, there's
general
plenty of
mystery.
freaks there. Trust me.
Oh yeah.
There's no no
I love
shortage.
Louisiana, man.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
it.
Spent a few
Um,
years down there.
but artistically, I think it had a lot to do with parishes, besides the
Mm.
general aesthetics. You know, it serves the story a lot better.
Yeah, yeah.
But so I watched True Detective, and I knew that I wasn't doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, you hadn't
But
seen
what
it.
Yeah, but then after I watched, I knew I wasn't doing the same thing. But you know, there were similarities. Like I'll say this now.
Okay.
It's a fear of mine, but I'll just accept it because I guess it's a compliment. I can absolutely see it's not right. Like I mean, my beta readers, I've asked them like, hey man, like, you know, make sure this is not True Detective. And
Okay.
they've agreed that it's separate. So I
Yeah.
made sure of that.
Yeah.
But someone could say, "Oh yeah, it's like Cormac McCarthy wrote True Detective."
Okay.
Right? Like
Okay.
just because of my love of prose combined with the
Yeah.
general elements of the South.
Mhm.
Um so but what watching True Detective did for me was, and I never wanted to write a fantasy of any kind,
Okay.
but I found my lane for this book in that I was like, okay, there are elements, and they didn't include. I don't think they intended this at all. I don't think this is my interpretation. I don't think it was their portrayal, but True Detective allowed me to lean into the spiritual side of what I was doing.
Okay.
Right, so
All
it
right.
got me completely away from the general, you know, just everything that's sort of captured in noir and Scandinavian noir,
Mm.
like I was talking about just now,
Yeah.
and it sort of offered me a new lane. And from there, and this was coined after the book was done,
Mm.
but then it was sort of, that was when a friend of mine and I were talking about it, and we came up with heretical realism,
Okay.
which I think is necessary.
So what are the
The
elements of heretical realism?
Well, it's excuse me. There's an essay that I wrote that this book is absolutely the spiritual descendant of, and it's called Cthulhu Turns Right.
Indeed. Excellent. Excellent.
And thank you. And yeah, and it's by far my most popular work. So
Good.
hopefully give it a go
So
some surprise.
far. So far. After
So
today,
far,
we'll see.
so far. And in the beginning, it's the subtitles they write. I promise I haven't forgotten the question. I'm just taking a scenic route here.
Hey, man.
The the opening paragraph is maybe one of the most important things I've written,
Okay.
and it is
Do you have it at hand?
I don't. I basically have it memorized.
Oh, dude. All right, then let's have it.
It's
What do you got?
essentially in modernity, and this is directly tied into the arrival of right wing postmodernism,
Mm-hmm.
which is the assertion that there are truths that were discovered by the postmodernists, but that
Hmm.
the right has never engaged with those truths.
Hmm.
And part of that is the idea of direct experience, right? Everyone says,
Okay.
you know, subjective and, you know, you live your best life and all that crap.
Okay.
But the way I take that is that by returning to direct and subjective experience
Okay.
and, you know, not having consensual reality,
Yes.
then this is the opening
Objective
paragraph.
reality.
Yes. And consensual, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
They
um,
sometimes butt up against each other.
yeah, but it's returned us. This is where the paragraph starts. It's returned us to the perspective of the ancients,
Mm.
where the limits and objective truths of scientific observation, you know, of science,
Yes.
the objective reality of science are no longer relevant. And so, by returning to the perspective of the ancients, we are actually empowered to impose our own realities and thereby find meaning and truths and gods. And then by recontextualizing these things, then we would be able to build a consensus, because if something is true, if it has elements of truth, then there will be some consensus eventually, right? But as far as
So an objective
artists
truth
go,
based upon our subjective
correct,
experiences.
correct, and but it has to be recontextualized. Like that's the
Okay.
big thing,
Okay. How does that
and
happen? How do you recontextualize?
through heresy. Man, through empowering oneself. but what I mean by that is a good example is David Foster Wallace is sort of considered the last great American novel,
All right.
and perhaps the death of the novel with infinite jest. But key to David Foster Wallace is he did not like what he saw when and I think this is a leftist thing in general.
All right.
They look at themselves and they do not like what they see.
Hmm.
And so I turned them Post Heresy is my essay, which is sort of the sequel to Cthulhu, although no one read it. But
Hey,
and
man.
then like
Doesn't mean
I
it
termed
wasn't as good, you know?
right. But I termed the leftist postmodernists, I termed them the reductionists.
Mhm. Post
And
heresy.
is the name of the second essay, yes.
Yes.
And that's sort of, Cthulhu, post heresy, and then we end up with heretical realism.
Interesting.
And what I mean by that is an embrace of and a remoralization of the narratives that are often considered a reality, which are thereby usually considered some form of objective truth.
Okay. Okay.
And the book attempts to recontextualize a lot of the narratives that people have been conditioned enough that they have knee-jerk reactions to.
Okay. Okay.
And
What are some of the things that you
go ahead.
addressed there?
So
walk people through kind of generally the plot of what we're,
sure
of coming through the book, and generally then overlay on that, because I've read the book, I have to confess, and I've had the opportunity to read. It was a really, really enjoyable experience. I'm like appreciate having the opportunity to read it. So get into a little bit what the reader, kind of the plot going through, and what are some of the themes in it.
So the blurb is probably puts it best, which is follow spiritual vagrant Atticus Remington Scott through the uncanny uncanny saturations of the South as he searches for his cousin's killer and discovers that the devil has indeed come back to Georgia. And so the main character is referred to as AR, Atticus Remington Scott, and he receives a charge from his family after his cousin is killed to essentially find the killer for punishment. But by the grace of God, then his cousin boss is a deputy down in the county where their cousin Osby was killed.
Yes.
And so he comes down from his mountain home and is sort of introduced to the world at large, specifically one dealing with death and murder and the consequent existential despair.
Yes.
Regarding, and so it follows him through that journey. Regarding the sort of meta layers on it, I don't want to say too much because I wrote the book specifically because I this was my first long form, and one reason that it took so long was that I had to learn how to write plot, like
Okay.
to really give consideration to the audience rather than sort of this like ultra distilled, smack upside the head like a lot of my short stories were.
Okay. So weaving it and connecting it into the story, because I noticed there's a sort of it explores this kind of thin membrane between life and death, heaven and hell, what's real and what's not real, or perhaps what's a vision. So there's a kind of a spiritual text going through, and I think perhaps this is what, as you've explained, this sort of genre that you're working in, it has the kind of gothic nature, and it's sort of a haunting and spiritual component to the story, which is, I think, very magical.
Yeah, that's exactly it, man. I think I'm very much in line if you're familiar with Zante and his Mytho America project.
Yes.
Um I'm very in line with this idea of rediscovering uh the spiritual side of America that was never considered by the Puritans.
Hmm.
And I won't say the meta explicitly, but I will tell anyone who's interested in reading that closely that the prologue is sort of the clue for the entire thing
Hmm.
as far as what he's doing. Now just referring simply to solely to the spiritual element,
Yes.
that is what I talked about with the first paragraph of Cthulhu,
Yes.
where I think that, you know, and I turned to the reductionist, and it all, in my mind, it begins with psychoanalysis,
Okay.
to where people are constantly not only self-aware, um, which is self-awareness is not a bad thing, but more importantly, they're self-conscious,
Yes. In a
thinking they
negative
have
way.
it always in a negative way,
Okay.
and but with no end in sight either.
Hmm.
Right. And it truly is a reductionist of the human spirit and the mode of being.
Hmm.
And so the spiritual membrane, as you termed it, rightly so, is is to embrace the violent passions of being.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that's something that's very, very important to me on a personal level. And I think it probably comes through my work where um there's where I have an obsession with this concept of visceral beauty.
Okay. Define for us
And
visceral beauty.
it is, and when I say visceral, it has nothing to do with, you know, gore, right?
Hmm.
Just to make sure that that's clear.
Hmm.
The
But it's something you feel in
visceral,
your viscera, I guess, is your guts. Something that you
it is,
experience with your
but
intestines.
it's that appeal, right? It's that appeal to your survival instinct, and that's
Hmm.
very much, you know, your lower brain and your higher brain,
Yeah.
you know, your modes of thinking, like they're all part of it.
Hmm.
And the one thing that sort of excites me more than anything else is, and there's nothing that really captures it as strongly as something like anime,
Oh yeah.
right?
Okay.
Some people
Okay.
just clicked off, but
Like anime fucking what?
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
out. No, but there's a
But
large there. People have to understand there's a language of anime, and when people are
Mhm.
showing you their anime, their waifu, that shit means something to them. And BAP will
True.
throw up the waifus and stuff, and people are like, "What the fuck is? What is this? Is a language?" For example, who is the one poster that you've mentioned to me a couple of times? Who is like way into the kind of Remilio, Milady?
Oh,
Um,
he's the CEO actually. It says Charlotte Fang.
Correct. So they speak in the language that the average person, I myself am like, what the fuck are they talking about? What are these things? They they've
Right.
they've gone deep into a kind of a jargon
Hmm.
of whatever group they're in, which is fascinating because the old the his previous account was of course legendary.
Maya.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think they're probably on the avant-garde of art, honestly, as far as form goes.
Yes.
But regarding visceral beauty, the reason I mention anime is, and you know, I mean, and we don't even, not even disregarding lollies and waifu and everything.
Correct.
Even something that a majority of people might have seen, like Attack on Titan,
Mm,
you know, you'll notice that drama is given even to moments before the drama happens.
okay. The
And
pre-drama.
I'm sorry.
The pre-drama.
Yes. And for me, it's sort of my own route when I say visceral beauty, to where you have to the everything when it comes to words, then everything can be captured in beautiful prose,
Hmm.
even horrific things. And I don't just mean gore. I mean, you know, I hope I did it successfully and within the book, right? Like I mentioned existential despair earlier.
Yes.
And there is, you know, AR does come to see Osby, and he sees the pictures of her on the autopsy table. And even in the face of that, you know, even in the face of death,
Yes.
it doesn't have to be describing, you know, it's a person,
Yes.
right? And so
Well, and a lot of
to
Greek plays, I think a lot of the violence, or particularly the death, occurred off stage. You could hear it.
right.
They're screaming off stage or whatever. But there's something about like the imagination that can paint. Um, you know, I think that's kind of the magic of prose. You can give or withhold as much as you want to give or withhold, and you have there's a kind of power there to, like, you know, open the kimono a little bit and show the amount of lag, and in parentheses,
Mm.
visceral violence or beauty that you want to show by
Yeah,
controlling the amount that you're interested in providing to your reader.
absolutely. And that's the context. And I will say I don't think I'm the most subtle writer, but
Okay.
I am very aware of how I portray things. I think one of the prettiest passages in the book is
Mm.
when AR sees Osby's pictures of the autopsy
Yes.
and
Yes.
discovers her.
Yes.
And so I'll it'll be a little bit of a tangent if you're all right with it,
Hey,
but
let's do it.
um a real problem that I kind of have with the previous approaches of our culture,
Okay.
and this would include both the aristocracy of Europe, and it would also include sort of um, Christian America, and obviously I mentioned the Puritan roots.
Yes.
The West seems to have a terrible problem with integrating darkness into our lives and into our
Interesting.
perspectives on the world.
Interesting. Interesting. So
Where,
follow that out. Why?
you know, I think part of it is this and just the general individualism that we have. I mean, like I said, I won't harp on the Puritan thing. That one's more obvious.
Mm.
But there's because the West reflects an individual life,
Okay.
and in my mind, it reflects it literally. And this is why the West decays and has to be reborn. Then, because I believe it reflects a mortal life.
Okay.
Then there are guards and discernment, and there are barriers to the West
Okay.
where, whether for protection's sake, whether for, you know, taste sake, you know, I mean, you can even consider the general, you know, basic bitch general Eastern philosophy of like Taoism, right? I mean,
Okay.
it's right there, right? Male, female,
Mm.
boom, it's all one thing. And
But
we just don't do that.
why has there been a hesitancy then to sort of, or do we kind of shy away because the West in some ways has had a, I mean, a lot of the last wars were fought, sorry, elsewhere. So we were spared the particular violence of World War II and
Sure.
one, especially. We've had the Civil War and other things, and sort of the violence of just living out in the rough as you manifest destiny your way west across a
Mhm.
continent, an untamed continent. So there's a bit of a kind of a natural violence. But what do you think it is that we
Right.
have not the individualism? Because there's certainly that, and a kind of a collectivism of the Eastern, you know, hive mind, longhouse way of
Right.
living. So what do you think it is that has created that situation for us here in the West?
Well, I think part of it is also necessary because even mentioning like the West, like going forward, if you don't have, or even like the spread of Christianity, the British Empire, if you don't have an individual identity that says this is us, this is them,
Mm. Yes.
then, and I don't mean in the classic human sense, I mean like a very defined, we are not the same.
Yeah, the friend enemy distinction.
Right. Then the West wouldn't have done what it did. Right.
Yes.
But the hesitancy, I think, was something that was just lost. Perhaps I'm not, one of the scholars of Twitter, right? So I
Mm.
won't go too much into it as far as history goes.
Yes. Why it may have
But
happened, but it's a sense that you have.
it is, and it's also perhaps something that a lot of people talk about that was lost, right? To where that capacity, once Western civilization as an individualist culture,
Mm-hmm.
and we are at our best when we are at war,
Yes, that's probably true.
because we have no collective effort, right?
It's the only thing that
Um,
brings us together, I guess.
it really is, it really
Yeah.
is, and that's fine. But in times of peace, there's no reflection, right?
Hmm.
There's no reflection. There's no
A lack of focus or
consolidation.
purpose.
Well, not just purpose. I mean, in regards to I'm simply referring to as like darkness,
I see. Yes.
right? And and I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with that, and that's fine. But I see it as a failure, because if darkness was integrated,
Mm.
then a lot of the things that are happening to the West wouldn't be capable, right? I mean,
Mm.
the number one form of the counterculture was some form of heresy,
Okay.
and all the popular culture at the time could do, and it's not popular culture now, but the opposition to it could do, is sort of just bitch and moan
Yes.
and say that, that's wrong, look at the degeneracy. And I'm not going for like a pagan hedonism here. America, in my mind, is absolutely a Christian country.
Okay.
That is,
Are we still though? I mean, we were maybe founded that direction. Even like Thomas Jefferson wasn't necessarily a Christian; he was a deist, and yet in the Declaration of Independence, he still said, God and of nature's God. So he wasn't he didn't choose a particular flavor or denomination of organized religion, but he understood that there was God, objective reality, and nature's God. So, like,
sure.
nature has a rhythm. And I think the Birds had a song about it. Like, there's time for this, time for that, time for this, time for that. And if you're
Right.
an idiot and you don't even pay attention to those things, then you are not paying attention to what he was referring to as nature's God. But integrating the integrating darkness. What is the antidote to that? How does one integrate darkness?
Well, I think maybe just to phrase it better, rather than just saying it's a Christian country, I would say it's very much a Protestant country. And
Sure.
that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
includes the individualism and the individual relationship with God. And
Yes.
then, people have said, ad nauseum about how wokeness very much mirrors that.
Yes.
And so,
Yes, yes, I agree. I agree. I like that kind of connection. And to me it is a kind of a pearl clutching, like, oh my God, I can't believe you believe that. Well, shut up, fuck you. That's what I believe. You believe what
right,
you believe, I believe what I believe. Get off my lawn, dude. So
right.
like, but
But
yeah, people get I agree with that kind of. I don't know. I hope you're saying that you agreed with it because
I
I see
do, I do.
yeah, like see people like I'm not supposed to believe this. Well, fuck you. I believe that, so I'm sorry, but like everyone's getting offended by everything. You can't say anything.
Yeah, and that's sort of the power, though, right? Is we're continuing that Western individualism that allowed us to define ourselves in the face of opposition, and then
Yeah.
in the maelstrom and chaos of being unformed.
Yes.
And part of that, and this is, I think, this is a pretty big theme in the book, is this concept of infinity
Yes. Absolutely.
and related to God.
Mm. Mm.
And as far as integrating darkness,
Mm.
something that wouldn't be a spoiler of any kind is, you learn this in chapter 2. AR's dad whose name is Cillian. He's a former cult leader.
Mm.
And while I also think that he has some incredible insights, then modern person with any sort of education would identify some of the things he does or says, and immediately diagnose with some sort of psychological label.
Yes. Yes.
And it's really easy, man. The first thing I ever wrote for Twitter was a thread called "The Right Must Become the New Left."
And what do you mean by
And
give me a summary of that?
is
Because
what
that's a
has
powerful thing to say.
yeah, it's a hard thing to say, man. Like it's hard.
Fuck
It's so
yeah,
hard to
man.
articulate
But
because
yeah, but it's super important, I think.
well, because like if we look at our current mode, right, of living in our current culture, then anything I consider anything conservative to be in support of the current regime, right? The woke
Okay.
government, everything that we're sort of dealing with, anything that is not that is considered conservative is to continue that system.
You're conserving that.
Correct. And I'm not
So it's
calling
counterintuitive
for
because when you say conservative, you're thinking obviously the regime is far from conservative. They're embracing every kind of satanic, unbelievable,
right.
despicable, retarded thing that you could think of and things you couldn't even think of. But so you're using the word conserve in a different way, in such that anyone who pretends to like, I'm going to be the president of that machine, okay, then you're preserving that machine. Therefore, you are
Correct.
conservative, even though the machine is wildly
Right.
liberal, chaotic. If it's a cannibal circus, you know, you're gonna if you want to go be in the circus master of the cannibal circus, then you're conserving it. What
Mm.
you're proposing then is that if the right needs to be what the left used to be, which is wanting to tear down the establishments.
Correct, but also to build that's where the right wing. So the hard part about when I say anything mentioning the right is the new left or conservatism
Yes.
is that it implies that what is traditionally thought of as conservative is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And just for anyone who's interested in picking up the book, this book is not political in any means. I'm more
Yes, that's
talking about
true.
the ideas that led to it. It is not political.
At all.
So but as far as becoming the new left, there has to be this is why I reference the reductionist versus right wing postmodernism is to find something new. The left can only destroy.
Okay.
And so, but
It's
for
death.
example,
It's death. The left is just a death cult.
it is. And but for the regarding the book, something I mentioned psychoanalysis, right? We look at some as Cillian to portray Cillian's experiences, his of the world, his spiritual output and vectors
Mm.
as actually spiritual
Yes.
rather than schizophrenic.
Or some hedonistic expression of like having orgies and whatever. Like,
Correct. But although I will say there's nothing pagan about the book, I don't think.
mm.
But to portray it's as simple as inversion, right? I can't talk about it, but there's a part in the book
You'd have to kill everyone.
where I literally invert something.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
For sure.
okay, I could give a better example. I made a promo video
Mm.
for Give of the Ghost,
Yeah, I
and I
want to
had
talk about the
someone
videos
do
too,
it.
man.
Yeah. So then there was one where there's a classic scene from the movie The Witch,
Okay.
which is really fun to contrast with sort of the stuff that I've come up with because it's so definitively New England.
Yes.
And at the end of the movie, then spoiler alert, then the young woman, Ann Taylor Joy, I think is her name, she
Mhm.
goes and joins a coven of witches, and they're dancing around a fire, and they begin to levitate,
Okay.
and she starts looking down and sort of laughing hysterically.
Hmm.
And by the end of the movie, she is levitating higher than they are, and she's at the very top of a tree, and that's the end of the movie.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
This is very basic shit.
Yeah.
But for that video,
Hmm.
all I did was flip it upside down, and I edited it so that when it was showing her face laughing, it looked much more like a grimace.
Okay.
Like she was
Okay.
grimacing.
Yes.
And so you get something kind of, and it's a very, I mean, it's not like, look at this intellectual acrobatics I just did.
Yeah,
But
but it's
even when it's
symbolic.
but when it's upside down, not only is it inversion, which Rise of the New Left is sort of a classic Satanist trope,
Yes.
but also as the
An upside
initial
down gay
covering,
rainbow.
yes, I mean that, right, exactly
Flipping
that,
their symbols on them. Yeah.
which is what they do. And so even when you flip that scene upside down, as those widgets, because they're writhing as they're levitating, and so when you flip it upside down, you still have the flames and they're beginning to go downward, which obviously hell, right? That's the
Hell
obvious point.
yes.
But you get this really cool effect to where if you pause it, it almost looks like a Renaissance painting because
Yes.
all of the light is coming from above.
Yes.
And so they're writhing as they go downward, and you continue to the main character, and by the end of it, she is levitating to the top of a tree. You invert it, it looks like she's going down, but the tree, because it's in New England,
Mhm.
and because it happened to be skeletal, it looks like she's going down underneath the roots.
Ah, the branches have become roots then. She's
Yes,
descending into the earth.
correct. And a simple inversion of which is levitating is for then being cast into hell,
Yes.
right? And
Yes. Yes.
and and so you take, and
Re-
witches are a common kind of thing regarding like counterculture.
yeah.
And so not to get too far off track away from the book, but that is a simple example of what Right is the New Left is, of what subversion is. And to where you
Mm,
take, and Mytho America, like I said, I'm a very big fan of it. It
mm.
does things like that. It takes a picture. One of the most popular posts I think it ever had was a old school, probably in the 90s grocery store, with the bright lights inside of the drink cooler. I
Yeah.
mean, it's very aesthetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just a whole line of like Sunny D, right? And so something will tell you, oh, you look at Sunny D, and now, right, we're like, oh, that's cancerous and it's full of, high fructose
Sugars
corn
and
syrup
corn
and sugar,
syrup and
and it's slop, right?
yeah.
But by presenting it in such a way, he
Yeah.
does it in such a way that it remoralizes, to where it's like,
Interesting.
oh wow, like this is, to look at America, whether to rediscover things or to recontextualize things,
Hmm.
and to reinvigorate them with meaning, because I mean the meaning doesn't leave, right? You can be jaded and absolutely destroyed by
Yes.
cynicism,
Okay.
but people don't naturally live that way,
And they don't want to, I
that
think.
they don't want to.
Yeah.
And so go
Life
ahead.
you want to live. There's some deep desire inside you want to live.
Yeah. And so regarding the book though, is it takes certain narratives, like I said, Silly and Sebastian. I just don't want to give spoilers. This is why I'm kind of stalling on the book. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it takes common narratives, and all it takes is to reportray those or to invert them,
Yes.
and thereby find new meaning and hopefully some form of truth.
Man, beautiful. That's very well said. You're doing more than just writing fiction. You're kind of plotting the 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 waypoints of a philosophy, I think.
I think so. I hesitate to say it just because I'm really not well read when it comes to philosophy. I do think it is almost it's a schizo spiritual art theory. But by not to even take away from the ideas, because I obviously believe them enough to follow it and
Yeah.
produce something from them,
Yes.
is I think that that's where art starts. And I talked about, capital R realism can't show us
Mm.
anything anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of the dual realities that we live in,
Mm.
because we've been so demoralized, whether it's due to genres parameters,
Yes.
that might be one thing. Pulp Fiction is making a comeback in a big way,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's sort of the appeal to that. And it's generally really masculine. Is it's a survival thing, right? That's lower brain, right? You read pulp, and it's all like someone's trying to survive in some capacity,
Yes. Yeah.
and I think that the next
Solve
step
a
regarding
mystery.
art, yeah, and where life is like demanding something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that regarding my ideas, this also goes back to the integration of the whole, right? The
Yes.
darkness and the higher mind, where I think you don't have to necessarily do genre, but you're not going to remythologize the world if you're stuck in like the modern Inui.
Yes. Yes. So you're kind of giving you're sketching out what it would look like to step away from that.
Yeah, I think something that encapsulates it sort of perfectly.
Mm.
I just told a friend this because he was asking about something.
Yeah.
My whole goal, right? What if people want to know, like, what is the mindset that I adopt for my work?
Yes.
What I would like, and let's presume that the Bible to some degree, right? Not you
Yes.
specifically, but generally speaking, if you're a Westerner, like maybe in the future people won't, but the Bible,
It's
right?
considered a basic kind of check the box for literacy, just sort of basic
Yeah,
literacy to have an understanding of
exactly,
literature
exactly.
generally, mythology generally, and religion generally as well.
Right. And so imagine that you are, and people might not be familiar with his work, and that's fine, although I
Mm.
recommend it. He is everything to me.
Oh, I
Um,
know who you're about to mention.
yeah, you do.
I know
But
who
I'll
you're about
mention
to.
him in this context, right? Imagine that you are in the post-apocalypse where you have no education, you
Yeah.
have no societal upbringing, and you find the complete works of William Blake.
Words in red, baby.
Heresy.
Heresy.
And so and William Blake is very spiritual in nature. Like I mean, like literally.
Mm. So that's your guy.
He
That's your prophet.
that is my prophet. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but to understand what I mean by that, by everything I'm saying, or to adopt the mindset that I'm talking about,
Yes.
I, I read William Blake. Read anything, but I'm saying William Blake because he's as powerful as the Bible.
Yes.
Then read William Blake without any intellectual interference or input.
Mm.
That's what I want when I'm talking about everything traditional conservatism is dead. It has to
Mm.
be recontextualized. It has to be rediscovered. When I talk about subjective reality and director interpretation,
Yes.
that is what I mean. I mean, when you read something and you don't care about the addendum or the annotations,
Yes.
and you simply take it in for everything that you receive it as.
Read it with your guts, basically.
Correct. With your
Yeah.
soul, your spirit,
The
man.
viscera of your body.
Yes.
Yes. So as I was reading through the work, I felt that well, obviously William Blake did not make an appearance in the novel. However, I feel that there's, in a way, the role of William Blake is to AR as a kind of disembodied Virgil is to Dante, in a way, his guide leading him along or pointing out the way in the Inferno in Dante's journey. William Blake, in a way, guides AR, I think.
He does. And his father Cillian, although he started the cult based on interpretations of the Old Testament, he is a decided disciple of the good old KJV, Milton, and William Blake.
That's it. That's all
And
you need.
yeah, basically, you do basically.
Oh, it's all
And,
a young man needs.
right.
Yeah.
And so there's I'm calling for a lot of destruction and void here,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And it's necessary.
Yeah.
and those who are not willing to take that leap will not survive.
No. I
Um,
think millions, maybe billions.
yeah, their souls will rot,
Wow.
and the culture will die with them.
Tell me a little
But
bit of. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
but the presence of William Blake throughout is not only to sort of articulate and showcase
Mm.
his truth to the situations that AR finds himself in,
Yes.
but it is also a very small but significant thread back to the past
Okay. Okay.
in which he learned from his father.
And people have to figure out what that means.
Yes.
Mhm. Let me ask you a question about, as a writer, the relationship of you as a writer to your reader. So it strikes me as there's kind of like two different ways, and I'll kind of just, as fast as I can, explain them. And maybe there's a third way, a fourth way. So I'm curious, when you're writing and you're putting words on a page and you have something in your mind, do you is it your purpose sort of in writing to kind of faithfully reproduce, to like basically copy paste the scene or the image, or if you're a musician, maybe the melody or the lyric, the idea as it exists in your head? Is it your purpose to copy paste that exact image into the brain of your reader so that they have precisely the thing in their head that you have in your head? Or do you have a kind of impressionistic style where you're you're kind of setting a tone or a mood, maybe a temperature, and you kind of want your audience to go on their own trip, right? They kind of explore their own version of your words, and they may come to a different conclusion than what you maybe intentionally meant. But you're fine with that. It's fine. They can kind of come to their own conclusion. Is there something in between, or do you have one or the other?
Um, I never have before.
Hmm.
With my stories. There's my relationship with my writing is that it is mine.
Nice,
It
dude. I
it
like
it
that
is
answer.
it's solely mine.
Yes, I
And
like that answer.
I've been I I get it from my mother,
Okay.
but I have
All right.
an innate ability to willfully, like, push myself into willful ignorance,
Okay.
and a sort of like, if I don't care about it, then I'm not going to care.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if you read the my previous short stories, then they are very much exercises, and they tend to be very distilled, um, with Give Up the Ghost being plot heavy, and I am giving it away as a free PDF, but also, being for sale as a physical copy.
Yeah, of course, people got to get a
And
physical copy of it.
I hope so, man. It's beautiful. I got to prove it's beautiful. But I did want to, being long form, right, and asking people like, okay, like, you're willing to read this. So the consideration that I gave the reader was an attempt at making sure that it was satisfying.
Okay.
And that's about it.
Hey,
And
man,
by that,
it's not, if you can satisfy your reader, then you've accomplished something, I guess.
sure. And I mean, and then they'll be satisfied.
Yeah.
But the
Please
thing is
rate your level
too,
of satisfaction. Here's a survey at the end of my book. It's
right?
basically like, fuck, no, I don't care.
That's on them though, right?
There's not a post-reading survey
Yeah.
insert in the back of the book.
There's not. You can email me though. I have my
There's not.
email in the back.
We're happy to talk about it, or maybe not.
Yeah.
No, of course you're
But
always happy to talk about it, but it's like the ideas are for you. If you feel that you understood what you wrote and you captured, if you scratched the itch for you, the itch is therefore scratched. Is that kind of the vibe?
It is, but it's an almost unhealthy urge to share it.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of the whole conundrum of writing. It's like, well, oh, if you don't care if anybody reads it, then what are you doing sitting long hours in front of your
Sure.
typewriter writing it
Well,
out?
well, well. I'll clarify though, right? Not to share the story, right? And I'm being honest here. Obviously, I want people to read it. You know, I want to share the story, but the primary motivation, the thing that runs deep,
Yes,
right? When you talked about, you know, writing for yourself, or you know, the latter option,
yes,
I I write in such a way that I am doing everything in my power to make myself think and to make myself feel.
okay.
That is what I want to share.
Mm,
And I think that's my insistence on visceral beauty, and also probably why I tend to not lean more towards subtlety, to where when you read us, I've realized this, you know, plotting thing with a long form
mhm.
and the context that we're talking about. When you read that scene with AR seeing Osby for the first time,
Yes, yes, powerful.
I thank you. I do not want anything to be contrived, right? When I think of that scene and when
Yes,
I write it out,
yes,
then I try to do it as sincerely as possible and
yes,
with the feeling that it gives me.
yes.
And that's what I'm hoping to share.
Okay, yes, yes, yes. Like this is what I felt. I'm using my words carefully to describe what I felt. My hope is that you will feel what I felt, the way that I felt it, to the degree
Yes.
that I felt it. And that will
Yes.
be conveyed through the message. Like for example, I think maybe a way to explain it is 1,000 years ago, there was a band. It was called Pearl Jam. They put out one great album, okay, and then they put out a whole bunch of other albums, which you could take the songs off all the other albums and make maybe a second good album. So this is when I was a young man. So they had a song that was like a B sides to one of the first actual good album, and it was called Yellow Ledbetter. Who the hell fucking knows, even until today, what he says in that song? It's just like it's like was the OG mumble rap. So he's singing a
Yeah.
song. Nobody has any idea what he's saying. It's completely like just mumbled song. I think people have like actually found the lyrics by now. At any rate, I say all this to finally get to the point. There was an interview with him, and they were like, "Dude, what does this song even mean, man? What are you saying?" And so his response was like something that I sat on it. I was like, "Dude, are you really, really, really?" I'm not sure. So he said the following: "I don't want to tell you what it says." He just said that. I don't want to. I am hesitant to like tell you exactly what the lyrics were. I guess I'm like, what? No, because some of you may have kind of like as you're listening to the song, you have a kind of an interpretation of your own. And then I may have meant one thing and you might have interpreted it in a separate, different way. And if I tell you what I meant, if I, demystify the purpose of the meaning of the work for you and tell you what I meant, I don't want to rob you of whatever thing you decided I meant. I don't want to kind
Mhm.
of deprive you of your own vision of that.
Right.
So for me, I'm like, fuck that shit, dude. I'm a control
Yeah.
freak. I'm a fucking control freak. Like,
Right.
I want you to think what I want to paint a very specific image, and I want you to come away with precisely what I felt I want you to feel. That's kind of more my approach, I think.
Yeah. Well, I am I'm a huge fan of graphic novels
Yes.
for many reasons, but one of which, and there are sort of two things to this. One of which is that I don't think there's a more powerful medium than text combined with image.
Okay. Yes.
And
Yes.
one of the reasons that is because it completely dodges a suspension of disbelief.
Hmm.
Right? It's inaudible. I can draw a picture of God, and if in the story that is God, then it's inaudible.
Sure. Yeah, good.
People
Good
might
point.
disagree, but that's the way it is.
Go write your own story about God. This is my story. This is what God looks like in my story. That's real.
Sure. And so it is a level of control, but tying that into twofold, right? I'll add the second part and we'll come back. One of my, not just because of graphic novels, but one of my favorite authors in the entire world, who is an anarcho-communist, is Alan Moore.
Okay. Why not?
And
What are
in
some of the things you've read that you like, just like a real hit, like
I
his
mean,
his greatest hits?
From Hell is probably his greatest graphic novel. It's so good. It's his very thoroughly researched hypothesis on who Jack the Ripper was. And the art. Oh, what is his name? Hold on. The art is by Eddie Campbell, and
Yeah,
it's
Eddie Campbell.
absolutely insane. But more to the point, though, he has a massive book called Jerusalem.
Okay, cool.
And it's very, very much sort of tied into Joyce, where rather than Ulysses, where he goes through Dublin, he goes through Northampton, through the ages.
Okay.
Very postmodernist, all over the place. It's very self-indulgent, but if you buy that ticket, then you take the ride and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But I say all that to say, I have not read Finnegan's Wake.
Okay.
I don't know if I ever will, especially
Yes.
being like American.
Yeah.
But he has a chapter in there dedicated to Lucia Joyce, who is James Joyce's daughter.
Yeah.
And she was committed to an asylum in Northampton, and she died there for the remainder of her life, and she passed.
Yes.
There's a rumor, I don't care if it's true or not, but there's a rumor that much of his work and ideas came from her. And I can't remember, she may have been schizophrenic.
Interesting.
But anyways, so
It's kind of
it's
scandalous if he got all he just ripped all of his greatest work from his schizophrenic sister.
Yeah. Was it? It was his daughter, though, right?
Daughter,
Okay.
okay,
I was,
yeah.
I was just making sure I didn't get it wrong. So anyway, and she was also Samuel Beckett was a lover of hers,
Oh, weird.
and so he writes, he writes this chapter, this section of the book in the style of Finnegan's Wake, and it is literally her having a good day at the asylum and with Beckett
Wow.
coming to visit at the end.
Wow.
And I think it's only about 20 or 30 pages. But deciphering that text was one of the most sublime experiences that I've ever had in my life.
And how challenging was it to decipher it?
Not overly so. I mean, if you can figure it out. I don't think
Yes.
it was as difficult as Finnegan's Wake at all. I mean, it
Joyce
said
is tough.
he said he had to stop writing for 18 months after he was done with it because it fucked him up.
Yeah. Sure.
But it's one of those sublime. You can find it online too, I'm sure. But it's sublime.
Yeah.
But the reason I mentioned graphic novels and that experience are because when it comes to reader consideration, like I'm fine with death of the author to a sense, right? In a sense. And what I mean by that is if you read some of the more thoughtful, intellectual aside, well, it's not an aside, but if you read more of the intellectual stances that I take in the book, then those are the things that are open to interpretation.
Okay.
And those I'm fine with. That's where it's sort of, think and feel, right? It means everything to me. Like when you think and you feel, then you're alive.
Yes.
And those parts are fine because
It's
it's
like a
something
one up on
pretty.
Descartes, though. He only thought, I think that for I am. And you feel as well, though. There's two different
Correct.
parts of existence.
Yes.
The thinking part and the feeling part.
And thankfully, like one can lead to the other. And but with
The reptilian brain and the mammalian brain.
But with the images, with the imagery that I put throughout the book, that is designed, hopefully, to make people feel.
Okay.
Whether it's setting, whether it's there are a million different ways that one can interpret. I'm just using the same example so we don't go in further into the story and give spoilers.
Yes. Yes.
Osby's autopsy pictures,
Yes.
right? There are a million different ways that could be portrayed.
Yes.
But I am far from a clinical writer,
Okay.
and I'm not going to write things, objectively and rationally.
Yes. Yes.
And so the way that I use imagery or give context to imagery, such as Osby,
Yes.
is the part that allows me control and allows me to go into a depth of feeling, because there is no room for intellectual disfigurement or deconstruction in that.
Yes.
It is exactly what is there on the page and as
Yes.
it is portrayed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that I draw strongly from graphic novels in that sense, to where
Yes.
imagery is something that's what makes me feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the
You're
interpretation.
the scene that you're interpreting there. When you write, do you have the whole thing in your head? Did you walk around with these characters in your mind? Were they talking to each other? Did you know what they were going to do? You did you have the beginning and the end? You had to figure out the middle. How does one write a novel? Like how do you execute like tactically if you're going to approach writing a novel? What are you now that you've done it? For fuck's sake. Fucking congratulations, by the way.
Thank
Um,
you.
how do you recommend? What do you say? What do you tell people? Like if you're going to write a book, how do you go about it?
I don't know as though one method works for people, and I'm not being glib or anything about it.
No, for sure.
Like the sort of thing they teach in writing classes is some people are gardeners, some writers are gardeners, where they plant the seed and it grows, and then some are architects.
Yeah.
So like if it, as far as approaching is like serious writing advice, it's literally, whatever works, right? I mean, having finally finished the book, right? Like having finished a book, it
Yes.
is as hard as people say it is, man.
Yeah,
Like
man.
it's difficult.
That's what I'm saying with the Venn
Um,
diagram. There's a whole group of people who walk around with books. I mean, there's a whole group of people who never even walk around with any ideas about anything. We're not talking about those people. But there's a lot of artists who are like, oh man, I got a great idea. So they toy with it, they think about it. Maybe they're gardening, they're endlessly gardening it, but like it never
yeah,
comes to anything. So to actually sit down and write it, that's second ring, of human beings who have actually put in the work, sat down, put their fingers on the keyboard or a pencil in their hand, and actually crank out like what is that's the kind of the drudgery. So are you more of a gardener or are you more of an architect?
um, I'm closer. I'm closer to a gardener, but and hopefully this is for the better. I don't know if it's obvious in the work,
Mm,
but for me, it's much more piecemeal than that.
mm, mm.
Um, I mean, it's insane because I found myself through this work like opening, like, it's very much it's a looking into the void kind of book, I think.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
And but to do such, the way I'll simplify it. The way that I write is total piecemeal. I have the basic concept. Often I'll know the ending
Okay.
for whatever reason. And but then as things strike me, at one point I had four documents open, four documents for the book. I have two notebooks.
Yeah,
And
good.
so
That's what I want to
it's
know.
yeah, it's piecemealing though. So it's I'm not trying to, like, aggrandize my process. I've just never talked about it, and I've just experienced it, right?
Yeah. But I think
Where
it's so helpful. I that's one of the things that people are like, what do I fucking do? Like, how do I get it out? I said, well, listen to this, man. This is where my friend did it this way, and and
yeah,
and he prefaced it by saying, not everybody's going to do it the same way, but we're super super curious about like,
sure.
how did you do it? Piecemeal it. Like,
Yeah,
so like you have the beginning, you have the end. To my mind, it's almost like you have pearls. You're going to make a necklace. So you have a pearl here.
yeah.
You got to string them all together, right? So you're like,
That's exactly. It's literally it's a sort of, and I don't just right when the muse strikes, right? You're never going to get a book done if you don't just sit your ass down.
Correct. That is one of the, I want to put it like an asterisk next to this. That is a bit of advice that everyone has given.
Yes.
Everyone who's cranked out a book has given that same advice. So like, dear listener, if the people are still listening on YouTube, they always stop listening about 10 seconds in, but it doesn't, I don't care. It's an important conversation. Someone is listening to the end, someone will hear this part and they'll be like, okay, yeah, that's important. But you can't just write when the mood strikes you. You have to be disciplined.
Yes. Yeah, you do, which is the struggle.
Fuck
me
yeah, that's why not. That separates the men from the boys. That separates people who have a book and people who don't.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing. And so, like, it's interesting to hear how you go about doing it. Tell me who the book is. Who published the book? Who's the publisher?
I'm self-publishing it on Amazon.
Beautiful cover.
Me.
Cover published by me. Cover by me, dude. I love it.
That's videos by me.
Videos by me. Talk about that. This is something that I wanted to talk about with you as well. I tweeted. Fuck, I can't say tweeted, but I don't. How do you pronounce XEET? Seat?
Cheated.
Cheated.
I have no idea. Yeah,
I'm just gonna say
skeeted.
My name is Thickock, dude. I'm just gonna call it Skeet. That's what I'm gonna call it. So I skeeted early. It's fucking vulgar. I'm sorry, everybody. So I skeeted earlier that, like, finally it dawned on me, because I was very hesitant to call it X, and it dawns on me that, like, that Twitter was a crime scene that Elon purchased that was canceling everyone and denying people their free speech. So suddenly Twitter was like a dirty word for me. And I like dead named it. My brain dead named it. So it was like, I suddenly embraced, okay, well, for example, the name of this show has historically been Friends on X at twitter.com. And I'm thinking, like, maybe I'll take off the twitter.com part. I'll just say this is Friends on X. Right. So I'm sort of more embracing it. I noticed blah blah blah. I've noticed that you have a kind of deliberateness to your own X profile, and you're looking at it in a kind of, how do you treat that? What is your relationship with the X? Oh, fuck.
No, you're
breathing,
right,
man.
My bad.
I don't know what I want to say, really. I do know what I want to say. Will I really say it?
Yeah.
Because I know, like, dude, I have deleted or thought about deleting. I've gone through. I kind of have a love-hate. I'll be honest. I have a love-hate relationship with it.
For sure.
So, yeah. And so, what is it that you want to do with your art?
Well, the aesthetics are very important to me.
Yes.
And I've matured over the past year or so that I've been on, to where, well, I will say this, the work is more important to me than X is.
Yes.
Unfortunately. But
there's not a lot of love there.
There wasn't, but I've also found that, and part of it is the dictates of the world we live in. Mm-hmm. But I've found that through usually forms of aesthetic posting, and I really recently discovered this with the videos, to where almost ironically, X can be an escape from words for me. And
okay, good.
Then this was a recent discovery too, where I would get on and, you get sucked in like you do, and doom scrolling.
Oh yeah.
And it's a serious problem for me that I can't quite articulate. I mean, it feels like a mental illness, honestly, where I have an aversion to the fact that we have to say things in certain ways, and that because we're so not just, I don't just mean mimesis, right? Although that bugs me too. but general turns of phrase that is mostly embodied in so-called journalism, to where, okay, a perfect example is the "we need to talk" thing. So the algorithm, I'm sensitive enough to it to where the algorithm becomes obvious to me,
Okay.
and it really, really fucks with me,
Explain.
right? Like, I don't like it. Well, to where the biggest problem that I have with X, and it works, right? Like I said, I talked about the dictates of our life right now, but there are ways to where, the same as YouTube thumbnails, to where on a text-based platform, you phrase things and quote unquote craft things
Yes.
in such a way to elicit a response from people. And if you are on Twitter often enough, or if you doom scroll long enough,
Mm.
then those things become obvious. At least to me, they do.
Mm.
And so I was, but not all. I mean, Twitter is good for making friends. You know what I mean? And I'm happy to be a part of the sphere that I am a part of. Um, I found met some really incredible people.
Yes.
But the freedom, though, because I would do Twitter X, because that's because of addiction, and to participate and just to kind of see what's going on. I don't tweet a whole lot,
Mm.
but I found myself just in absolute despair every time I would do it. I was just like, I hate this shit.
Yes. Yes.
And
Because I think one of the reasons, I'll just put a pause and be very
sure,
quick. You mentioned the thumbnail on YouTube. So if you, for example, the number one YouTuber on planet Earth is Mr. Beast, and
right,
as you scroll through his thumbnails on his videos, you're going to see something. You'll notice something. Every single one of them has a fucking retarded, like, a mouth agape, eyes
hmm,
open, shocked expression,
right,
cut out head superimposed to something in a clickbaity title.
right,
I would rather be flogged to death in public than do that. I
mm.
won't do that. Like, I won't do that. Fuck that. If you ever, brother, if you ever open up YouTube and Thickhawk has got his fucking mouth open and his eyeballs all big and shit, pointing at some clicky bait
You gotta
stuff,
put Mr. Beast mouth on your rooster.
fucking hell, dude. I expect the strongly worded letter from you,
For
reminding me
sure.
of who I am and who
I
I'm
got
supposed to
you,
be.
man. I
Because
got
I can and I won't. So I know there's a game you can play. You can trick it out or whatever else. I'll tweet something and someone else will tweet almost identical thing, like 10 minutes later, and they get a million views. So like you can't. I can't think about that.
you.
For me, I
Can't.
can't think
No,
about that.
you can't. Well, that's kind of the thing too, and this sort of applies to my writing as well. In that, and my bad for the long-winded answer,
There's no
but
such thing as a long-winded answer. I'm
that was
just
pretty
kidding.
long. but but freedom came to me when I realized that I could aesthetics post,
Yes. Yes.
and
Yeah.
and that was when it was in the same way as my writing, because I too kind of refuse to participate in the algorithm. Like, I'll try to, if I'm announcing something, like I want people to notice, right? Like, hey,
Yes. Yes.
my book's coming out, man. Like, hopefully you're at least aware of that, right? I'm fighting goldfish brain and the algorithm on two fronts.
but
But
you're doing it though, and it's kind of the legwork. Okay, writing the book is part of it. Finishing the book, writing the book, you got it ready. You have a copy in your hand. It's fucking beautiful. This is what you wanted. But there's that second piece, right? When you made videos. The videos are cool. They're teasers, they're trailers. It's a little taste. You're doing a countdown. The book is coming. It's 5 days of the book, 4 days to the book, 3 days to the book, video, 2 days. Here's cover reveal. You're generating hype about your work, about your art. You have to do that. You have to be doing that. If you're not doing that, then I think it's, yeah, of course, what are you getting? I mean, a lot of the writers that have published to Amazon or whatever, they're getting basically $3 a book. Buy my book is not going to change my life, dude. I can't even go to McDonald's for $3.
Right.
However, that's not what it is. It's not about the $3. Okay, it's about you. I want you to take a ride. I've I want you to get on this ride and go along with me and have this experience with me. And I want you to feel something, right? I want you to feel this. And at the end of it, hey, they took a ride with you, and it was a kind of a magical experience. And fuck the $3. It's all for just the ride.
Mm. And I think that you can kind of, I've tried to keep my soul during it too. And by doing that, it is finding, sort of treating, I've come to treat, especially before I was promoting the book, but then I, still try to maintain where I try to treat my timeline and my profile as an art project.
Yes, perfect. I think that's the best way.
I think it's possible, and that you can forgive yourself, and people will forgive you if something is cool, right? If something, in the same way as like approaching a book. Most of the things have been promotional recently, as far as the videos and stuff go, but so they're a little bit more leaning towards cool. But if one was to scroll through my media tab long enough to where I was really, really posting aesthetics heavily,
Yes, yes.
then it was never just aesthetics, right? There are understated accounts like Mytho, um,
Mm.
I'm a huge fan of video edits. I just want to put that out there too. Those are cool as shit.
Yes.
But there are understated accounts like Mytho. But when I did mine, what you're seeing is my direct artistic sensibilities. And so I would pick an image and that I found online, and I would write, and I would try to make it an aesthetic experience also via text and using emojis and punctuation marks,
Mm.
where the entire tweet became an aesthetic, has like an aesthetic projection and appeal, or at least a craft to it.
Yeah.
And that's really, I'm sure I'll do that once the book's out. The algorithm hated it though, because I was using so much punctuation, so it thought I was like trying to skirt the algorithm.
Yeah, like what are you
Um,
doing? We don't
yeah,
understand what this means. It's like,
right,
yeah, a picture with little, anti, you know, face recognition
right,
dots
yeah,
all over it or
exactly,
something.
same like that, yeah, yeah, and so that was kind of it, man. To treat the whole thing like a project, an art project,
Mm.
and to I don't think it's an unworthy charge to give to people to make their timeline beautiful, whether it's their own posts or what
Mm.
they actually follow,
Mm.
especially now. But I think that if you can make your timeline interesting and beautiful and creative, and
Mm.
hopefully, as everything I try to do, think and feel, then I think that's acceptable and
Yep.
something worth doing.
Come for the vibes, stay for the
I
philosophy, as
don't,
I say.
yep. You must
Vibe.
understand only the vibe matters now.
Oh, that's all that matters. The vibe, the vibe controls the universe. He who controls the vibe controls the universe.
Yes,
So
sir.
tell me about so you have developed a great relationship with Men's World magazine. And anyone who hasn't caught your recent interview with the Rog Nationalist should go and check that out. Tell me about they seem to be publishing the first couple of chapters online. Tell me about that.
Yeah, they've been fantastic. Ren was actually the first person to publish me as PCM,
Mm.
and that was a story in Men's World 8, called Human.exe, which
Yes.
is one of my personal favorites. And so then I rarely write nonfiction. He published the first 2 chapters of Give Up the Ghost Along, and they've since changed quite a bit.
Mm.
But then I won the Pulp Fiction prize
Yeah.
for Man's World,
Around the world in
and
80 lays, baby.
around the world in 80, and that's coming at the end of September.
I'm
So
pissing you haven't
it will
shared that
actually
one with
be
me,
in
man, because
print.
I'm dying to read that one. Well, I guess I have to wait. have to wait until it comes out.
Yeah, that
But
one
I'm
I'm
looking
doing
forward
out
to
of
that.
respect for them. Yeah, but and then they asked about the novel afterward, and then I let them read the first act of the novel. I hope anyone that's interested in the writing, if you aren't certain about spending the money yet, then do check out Man's World. Not only for my stories, for everything, but they are serializing the first of 4 acts. My book is 4 acts,
Yes.
and they're serializing the first act, and it ends in what we will ominously call the pig scene.
Yes. Yes.
And the pig scene is one of the high marks of the novel, and so I
Yeah.
think that if anyone is gonna like if you like that first act, then I think you'll like the book.
They're going to include the pig scene in Man's World.
In the
They're going to
published
get
serializing it online. So far, they've done
oh,
chapters 1 and 2
nice.
last week. This
Nice.
week, they just today actually they did 3 and 4, and then the pig scene is chapter 5.
The
So I
devil went
believe
down to
that
Georgia.
the devil went down to Georgia. Yes, sir.
That's what it is. What else you got going on, man? I think tell me about the book maggot.
Book Maggot is an authorial interview show. It's based on the now the now defunct, killed by the woke mind virus, KCRW Bookworm,
Yes.
hosted by Michael Silverblatt. Although I'm sure he was also, or he's absolutely woke. But it destroyed him and his show.
Okay.
And the concept is to have interviews with a living author and to just do a deep reading of their work, of their most recently published work, and to talk to them about it. The idea being that by talking to them about the ideas that come out of the book, then those are the same ideas that allowed them and led them to produce the book. And so to talk about those ideas in and of themselves while also having the context of the book tends to be a really rich experience, at least for me.
Yes.
And it's been on hiatus for a while I was finishing the novel. I just released an episode though a week or two ago with Derek Main, author of
Yeah.
Characters,
Yes.
which
Was a
is excellent, published by Expat Press.
that was a great talk.
Thank you. Yeah, Derek's fantastic, man. He's one of the most literary people I've met
Mm.
in all of Twitter. Like truly dedicated to literature. And
Mm.
so that there's no set schedule because I have to read in the meantime.
Yes.
But that is going to start up here once the book is released too. And
Are,
there's some really cool authors that came into the sphere in the past year or so.
yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm excited to read their stuff and talk to them.
Are you going to do an audio version of the whole book? Because I
Give
know
Up
you're
the
reading
Ghost.
sections. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, eventually. I was pointed towards some really good AI software, but I want to read the whole thing myself. So
Now you got a great
that
voice,
is
man. You should do it yourself, I think.
appreciate it. And yeah, so it's coming. I mean, it'll be a project, but I will be releasing it.
Oh, you got already really great pieces. I had the Myth Pilot retweeted some of them, and his compliments are always just the highest compliments. So,
Yeah, I love Paulos, man.
yeah, he's
And
fucking
and
cool.
that was cool because I put out a poll once the manuscript was finished about what people would like to read because I did a reading in the first 2 chapters a while back and people really liked it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the times that I came onto your account when I
Mm.
thought about that. Normally, I ask these questions at the beginning, but I wanted to focus on your book at the beginning, and I would like to say the following: the Gospel of John begins somewhat famously. First line, in the beginning was the Word, and you know the rest of the story, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I
Mm.
wonder, was the Word, the Logos, with you, my friend, from the start? Or did it come to you, the Word, as a result of some life event? Tell me about your origin story, man. When did you start writing? When did you become aware of language?
I've read for the majority of my life, with various intervals of not reading. But when for whatever reason, I never considered writing.
Hmm.
It was just, I just loved books and I continued to read them.
Okay.
Um,
Do you have a memory of when you began to love books or for whatever reason? Or you just always had, there were always books. Your parents introduced you, they supported that. You read as a kid. Did your parents read to you like books as a
yeah,
kid?
yeah, books have always been sort of a big deal.
Hmm.
Mostly for me because I took to it,
Yes.
but like Sherlock Holmes meant a lot to me when I was young. I still remember the first time I ever read Three Musketeers.
Do you remember how
And
old you are, maybe?
I remember reading it. I don't recall how old I was. I do not. I do not.
Hmm.
But what made a difference for me was I went to college and I learned about the modernists and the postmodernists.
What you
And
study
that
in
was
college? Do you mind talking about that, or is that too revealing?
I won't talk about that, man.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
But I took an elective for literature, and once I once I discovered the things beyond story. But I mean, it wasn't even the thing that like sort of the defining moment for me as far as like, damn, I really want to start messing with this
Yeah.
was, and I don't remember the title, but Gertrude Stein had a poem where in that poem she attempts to mimic the strokes of a paintbrush.
Oh, nice.
And that was sort of the push that I needed as far as like, okay, because I mean I love story. Like I my loves in life are literature and film, right?
Hmm.
So I mean it's all stories for me and the craft and portrayal of them.
Yeah.
But once I found that I was introduced to that element, that extra element to where you could, do something a little bit beyond, then that's when I
Yes.
really became interested in it.
Yeah.
Um I've I've always enjoyed it. I took a long hiatus after I had started after university.
You mentioned that. Why did you take a hiatus?
It was sort of a perfect storm, but as far as literary influence though, I read Infinite Jest for the first time
Okay.
and it just destroyed me.
It was too
It
perfect and you
absolutely
had to put
destroyed
the
me.
pen down.
Yeah, it was something that I realized that I was entirely incapable of doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also recognizing sort of the monumental occurrence that that book was regarding the novel.
Hmm. Hmm.
And because there's not a whole lot more you can do,
Yeah.
right? And at
Yeah.
least I didn't think there was.
Yeah.
And so I did, man. I just gave it up
It's
like
the
for
end of
years.
history. It's the end of literature. There's
Yeah,
nothing more to say or do.
yeah. And then I gave it up. I mean, I probably wrote less than 100 words in like 4 or 5 years.
Huh.
And then I happened to join Twitter.
Is that what snapped
And
you out of it?
well, it did because I was energized. I found Twitter because this I didn't even have an account, but I was really into the Matrix and I
Yes.
still am. But
Yeah.
Matrix 4 came out and an account I just, looked at the trending
Hmm.
and an account had come back and they did sort of a thread that went viral on the Matrix 4.
Yeah.
And because it was so popular, then he was like, "Hey, basically you should like follow these accounts."
Okay.
And in that thread or in that post was Zero and Lomez.
Oh, yeah.
And this happened to be the month that Lomez announced the First Passage Prize.
Yes. Yes.
And after that, like, then I got introduced to that side of Twitter and found it entirely invigorating, not only artistically, but intellectually
Hmm.
and, in every way, as one does
Hmm.
the first time. Then,
Yeah.
a couple years later, you get
Yeah.
kind of like, God damn.
Blown out.
But
But that brings us straight back to the Scandi Noir Lomez post.
yeah, man, it's kind of funny. Yeah, that was a couple years later, but it's all, yeah, like you said, it's all connected. And so
Yeah.
to find that and to find like, okay, because one of the things that really, really sort of got me down, right? Because I didn't, like I said, like, I mean, my major was not English or literature.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know anything about the world per se,
That
other than having read a lot. I didn't
yeah.
know anything about the industry.
Yeah, that was my main question, and in asking about that was your like basically my question was your major like creative writing, and it wasn't. So that's very
No.
interesting too.
Right. And so, but then, I became interested in it, on my own volition. And, God bless the internet, I could learn quickly.
Yes.
And this was this is right around the time where, wokeness was starting to take hold, especially of the arts. And it was
Mm,
coming into the mainstream too, but it wasn't quite 2015.
yes.
It's about to be. But and so then that combined with Infinite Jest and sort of the anti-white male animus,
Mm,
I was just like, what the fuck?
yeah.
But then all of a sudden, once I found Twitter, then and I was still reading during this entire time.
Yes.
But then once I found Twitter, I was like, okay, like, here's something that exists outside of that.
Mm,
And, just kind of the first thing I ever the first thing I ever wrote, like outside of like, attempts at posting
yes.
was the dark MAGA Trump speech. And I hadn't written for years, man.
Yeah.
And it ended up like it's on my Substack, and it says it's like a 23-minute read.
You
And
had something to say, man.
yeah, I guess so, man. And it was supposed to be his commencement speech for his 2024 campaign. I wrote it in
Shit.
2022. And after that, like, and no one really, like, no one said anything about it, but it was just enough to kind of like, you know what, I like this. I like what I wrote.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then after that, I just started writing short stories.
Hey, man, don't stop, right? Don't stop. Who are some of the accounts that you follow that you would recommend that other people follow? People that you'd like to point to, artists that are coming up?
Um, Specifically, and I'll point to writers rather than posters.
Correct. Yes,
Um,
best.
Posters get the word spread about them pretty quickly.
And they do their own PR.
The Yeah, there's some really great writers, man. My As far as dedication to the craft goes, is Marty Phillips.
Marty Phillips.
Although he prefers not to have a lot of followers, so if a lot of people, you know, just read his books, right? Maybe not follow him on Twitter. Like, you can find him on Twitter, but
Yeah.
he
Don't
doesn't prefer
bug
to
the
have a lot of
guy,
followers.
huh?
Yeah, just look for his books, Marty Phillips. Let Them Look West and Millennium.
Okay.
There's also Caleb Caudell at Lit Middle,
Lit
and
middle.
he wrote, and they've both been on Book Maggot, by the way. He wrote The Neighbor, which is a fantastic novel, and then he recently released Novelty, which was a short story collection.
Yes. Yes.
You have
Are all of these self-published?
no. Actually, no one I mentioned is Marty is through Antelope Hill's fiction imprint, Jackalope
Yes.
Hill.
Yes.
And Caleb is out of he's published by Bonfire Books.
Bonfire
Um,
Books. There
yes.
seems like there's a lot of opportunity for people who are writing now to get their work out. It seems like a very rich environment nowadays. Like I think we're actually kind of lucky.
I think so in one sense, sure. Um, but
But in
also
another
no one
sense,
really
fuck.
reads.
In another
Nobody
sense,
reads.
fuck
No,
no.
nobody reads.
Oh, that's the problem. Everyone's publishing, but no one's reading.
Yeah, yeah. Six writers for every one reader, if not more. But no, I mean there's some fantastic stuff out there, man. Of course, Zero, HP Lovecraft.
Yes.
Um, let's see. A spot I talked about Derek, of course. T.R. Hudson,
T.R. Hudson.
who wrote his original novel was Automaton and The Perfect and the Wicked. Um, there's J.L. Mackey, but I think he might have taken his books off. I think he took them off of Amazon.
So you've been hanging out with like all of these people you found on X now.
Yeah, yeah,
Or is there
all of them.
yeah. So that seems to be a like outside of the this environment. Is there any IRL places to kind of publish or to associate with writers or writing or a scene of any nature?
Um, Passage Press and Man's World are the most relevant to our side of the internet.
Yeah.
I don't. It's hard to say because I protect my anonymity as well as I can.
Yeah.
Whereas, not all writers do. I know
Yes.
I haven't seen anything come from them, honestly, other than Honor Levy, who I'm planning on reading soon.
Yes.
Um, but then you also have like you know what, something that might be interesting, because for what I think is necessary for a thriving art scene
Yeah.
is criticism.
Interesting.
And a lot of the failures of criticism, I think, have been this sort of deconstructionist shit,
Hmm.
whereas good criticism is an elaboration in my mind.
Okay.
And so then there's
The criticism that you're seeing online now is not an elaboration. They're trying
oh,
to
well, not
like,
even online. No, I mean, as far as the industry goes and what the
okay.
tradition has become, there's some incredible literary criticism. But as far as what it's become, I think it's far more deconstructionist and sort of cynical.
Yeah.
Whereas if it is an elaboration, then that's the kind of criticism that's necessary. So I can't remember all the books, but there is an account called Tookie's Mag, Tooky's,
Yes.
and he and his friends do they do a literary criticism show that's they're very good, and they're also funny, and they do a criticism show on YouTube, and
Okay.
so that is a good place to find books as well. Also, I said Derek was published by Expat. Oh my god, dude, what's the name? God bless. Uh, Damn it, dude. Give me 1 second. Terror House, Terror House. So like Dan Baltic, and
Yeah.
his
Okay.
Nutcranker
Yeah. Yeah.
has
Yeah.
has made a lot of waves. He was published by Terror House as well as his co-host Matt Pegas.
Yeah.
Although Matt just released his newest novel, The Black Album. He self-published that.
Okay.
So,
So it's kind of a
yeah,
combination of things. If you want to work through a publisher, there are people available. If you want to go publish on
yeah,
your own, that's an option as well.
absolutely. Yeah, there are ways. As far as IRL stuff goes, I really don't know. I know there are some scenes that people can kind of find in New York and LA.
Yeah.
I have nothing to do with them though.
Yeah. You're not doing open
So
mic at the local bar.
no, man, I don't know
Slam
as though I
fest.
ever will either, unfortunately. I'm sure it'd be fun, but I don't think I ever
That
will.
ain't me, baby. That ain't
No,
me. Hey,
no.
man, thank you so much. Congratulations on the book. Congratulations on the release. It must be really sort of exhilarating.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me, man. And this
Yeah.
is this is the first time I've really got to talk about it, and it's done too, right? It's done.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe that's why I'm so long-winded. I can let it all out now.
Let it all
But
out, man.
um, but I appreciate it, man. And
Shit,
thanks
I've
so much for all your kind words.
been a long time coming. I so much appreciate the kind of openness to answering questions and the kind of exploration of why things happen the way that they do and why you've made the choices that you have, and we're sort of a kind of a meta talk about writing. There's so many really cool things. People have got great ideas, and I'm hopeful that we'd be able to encourage people to have have the fucking ball sack to just write and push it out, just get it out, and maybe it'll be awesome.
Man, we could use more good art for sure.
Fuck yeah, that'd be nice. Be the change that you want to see, which you most definitely,
Exactly,
my
bro.
friend, are. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm like super excited to see what happens with the book. Everybody's got to get out and check the book out. All right. Give up the ghost, PCM Christ. Do yourself a favor. Go and check out the book. All right. Everyone's reading it. You should be reading it too. Brother, thank you so much for taking the time. And we'll see you out there in the X in the X machine.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, brother. Bye.
Hey, yeah. Hey, yeah.